looking at his phone. Okay, I'm going to just start the meeting here. Okay, good evening. As chair of the Energy Committee, I am declaring that an emergency exists, and I am invoking the provisions of RSA 91-A23B. Federal, state, and local officials have determined that gatherings of 10 or more people pose a substantial risk to our community in its continuing efforts to combat the spread of COVID-19. In concurring with their determination, I also find that this meeting is imperative to the continued operation of town and government services, which are vital to public safety and confidence during this emergency. As such, this meeting will be conducted without a quorum of this body physically present in the same location. At this time, I also welcome members of the public accessing this meeting remotely. Even though this meeting is being conducted in a unique manner under unusual circumstances, the usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their name, please also state if there is anyone else in the room with you during this meeting. Okay, Amy Farnham.
Hi, I'm Amy Farnham. There's no one in the room with me.
Okay, Lou Hitzrow. Wait, we'll skip Lou. Yeah?
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Oh, you are?
Mm-hmm.
You are hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, I am here and nobody else is in the room with me.
Okay, Cliff Sinnott.
I am here and no one is in the room with me.
Robin Tyner.
You're muted, Robin.
You're muted, Robin. There you go.
Okay, Robin, can you say that again? You are muted.
Yeah, it's not showing me muted, but yeah, okay. I'm here. I just got one person in the next room over. I think they're going out to play basketball.
All right, we'll kind of move on from that because she's breaking up. Brianna Brand.
Hi, everyone. Brianna Brand.
And Julie Gilman.
I am at home and I am alone.
Okay, and we have a guest today, Henry Herndon.
Hello, I'm Henry Herndon and I am alone.
Okay, I just want to remind people that if you want to speak, you use the raise hand function, or maybe even just raise your hand. So I think that's all I have to say to start us off. Hopefully I did that correctly. Okay, so here's the agenda. The first thing we're going to talk about is community choice power. And Cliff and Lou will speak on that. Do either of you want to speak first?
I'll go ahead. I hope you all received the little blurb that I wrote that hopefully is designed to sort of focus our discussion. I sort of set out what I thought was a logical way of proceeding. And I ran this by Henry, so he and I have talked a little bit about this. It seems, if I remember our last meeting, we are all in agreement that we should continue to proceed to look into community power and perhaps setting up a community power aggregation. So this was my attempt to sort of move the process forward. So I'd like to know if people have any comments about it, any thoughts, additions, deletions, things that we should do differently. So what do you think?
Cliff, do you have something to add or anything to add to that? And then we'll talk to Henry.
No, I agree with what Lou has put down. I think one of the things that maybe talking to Henry about will help is what role do we need to play in this region? We are I guess one of the few communities in the region in Unitil's service area that that is actively working on this, and or not actively, but is at least studying it. I think Rye is another, or was, and I think some guidance from you, Henry, I think would be helpful in terms of the commenting on the steps and how we can interact with New Hampshire Community Power.
Sure. Yeah, so I think that already, Exeter has been a little bit more engaged than a lot of communities, if not sort of the most engaged with some of these communities that are been actively working towards this. But even Exeter's participation in a couple of the virtual meetings with regulators and with utilities has, you've already sort of been in the room, and that contributes to this sort of collective effort that is ongoing. So I think Exeter has already been an active participant to a degree. In terms of sort of like next steps and process, I think a little bit of an update. The attorneys from Nashua and Hanover are getting together tomorrow morning virtually to begin sort of actually discussing the creation of the CPNH, or Community Power New Hampshire. And that's still early stages. So in terms of like next steps, we are working on developing some of those, like, here's your sort of job description for an aggregation committee or an energy committee that wants to implement one of these programs. And I think a lot of us are still in the education phase. So I'd say, I think I circulated an invitation to a June 5th event that is sort of a next step in terms of statewide education. And that could be a good jumping off point to think about how does Exeter want to continue to be involved or not. And I think the final thing that I will say is this organizing group, which is the core team, is Cheshire County, City of Lebanon, City of Nashua, Town of Hanover, and then some affiliated smaller towns in Cheshire County. They have a pretty strong core team working towards this sort of statewide approach. And I think there is a gap in that there is not a community that is served by Unitil in that group. And there's not a community that's in the Seacoast region in that group. So there is opportunity potentially after that June 5th event to think about how might it make sense for Exeter, to what degree might Exeter want to be involved in that process, whether it's just reviewing the governance agreement that is being created by that group, or participating in some meetings or providing feedback in other ways. So I'll stop there, but that's a little bit of context for everyone.
Henry, we can participate in those meetings whether or not we're a member of CPNH. Is that correct? In other words, as long as we maintain an interest in learning as much as we can about community power and how it works, we can tune into all of those meetings. Am I right on that?
Absolutely. So it's all open at this point. It's all informal. There is no formal relationship that is CPNH. But over the coming months, the goal is to move from that informal phase to the creation of the legal entity. And through the creation of the legal entity, there will be an initial governance board established that will be comprised of members of initial community power aggregations. So it's possible that Lebanon and Hanover and Cheshire County and other small towns will have seats to appoint to that board. And the details of the design of that have not yet been finalized, but it's something that we all need to be thinking about in terms of balancing geographic diversity, small towns, large towns, cities, et cetera.
Unitil, Eversource, and so forth. Yeah,
it's good. It's good to try to cover all the bases, and it's not essential, but it is like part of the benefit here is having an understanding of how to streamline and standardize across utility engagements for each of the 4 utilities. And Unitil is actually perhaps the most innovative and forward-looking utility in terms of some of this stuff. And there's a lot of, I think there's some really good people there to potentially work with.
Mm-hmm. It's not premature for us to go to our select board, though, is it, to say that we are interested in investigating community power? And Julie, maybe you can help on this. I'm not sure how much the select board knows or understands about community power? What do you think we should be doing in that regard?
Well, Russ and I know a lot about community power because I explained the legislation to him. I think the next step is to present to the select board that this is an idea. Once we know what our details are going to be, how it's going to work, we should present to the select board as a whole. And when we're ready to, actually even before we're ready to take any kind of action, just to let them know what this idea is. I've mentioned it at the select board, but that was a while ago when the legislation passed. At the time, it's a different select board now, but at the time there was a lot of interest in the aggregation aspect, and but it didn't go beyond that and now we have a new board.
And my thought was just to come before the board and let them know that we are investigating this. It's a very preliminary step. Do you think that's appropriate or not?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
Sort of outline the basics as well.
Do you think that we should present this preliminary presentation to the board before or after the June 5th meeting?
Let's see, we're meeting Monday and then it's Memorial Day, right? So probably after the June 5th meeting.
So, we'll know more.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll know more.
Okay. Then I will try to get us on the agenda for the meeting after the June 5th meeting to get us on the select board agenda.
And are those being run virtually as well, I assume? This is Brianna.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's the same as this format. However, there are also attendees that don't show up with their faces. They just show up as names and they can ask questions typing in.
Okay.
I'm not really sure on that though. Julie, is that how it works?
We should ask Bob.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same platform that you see right now. So if you all open up your participant tab down at the bottom there.
Yeah, I see that.
And as the chair should have that open because that's where you'll see if people have their hand raised. And there's a participant tab, or attendees tab you can open up. Right now, there's no one from the public in. So
nobody came to our meeting.
Yeah.
Bob, in some of the other committee meetings, we had to let people that expressed interest in coming know how specifically to get in. So do people have to ask you to find that out, or?
No, this information is publicly posted on the agendas for all meetings. So, and there's also instructions there. So.
Okay.
I had another question. Do you think there's any reason to delay our contacting Tim Roach at Rockingham Planning? Could we go ahead with that? Does it make sense for us to start talking to him about how we go about forming a coalition and what towns they think might be appropriate?
Is that a question for me?
That's a question for anybody, I guess.
I mean, I know that they were initially sort of pursuing the municipal aggregation of municipal power contracts, and when they talked to us at our last meeting about this, I think they're sort of at a similar stage that we are, and they're looking at it. I think what makes sense to me is that if they would kind of help solicit interest from communities in this region when we're at the point of wanting to put together a group of towns that will want to implement this rather than we each do it individually. I think that would be tremendously helpful to Unitil, I would think, to be able to have a collection of communities that we're all pursuing this at the same time as opposed to one at a time.
Yeah, I thought they were already doing that.
I don't know.
Well, we should find out.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lou, I think it would be helpful. I mean, I think that's one of the questions I would expect from the select board is whether or not we've started to make those steps and reached out to other groups. So I would say there's no harm in starting that conversation.
Yeah, good.
Okay. Also, I have a list of various towns that went with us on the LED street lights. I have that email list, and that Henry, you probably have that list of other energy committees that from the regional hub, which you can send to me. I mean, you don't have to send it out. I'm not giving you work or anything, but I could kind of use that as a just. Kind of a gathering in, like who's interested in talking about this kind of thing, and kind of be a person that can direct people to either Cliff or Lou to get the real information. I can just gather them in. So I'll write that down.
Happy to share any contacts I have in the Seacoast Hub.
Okay. Okay, so does anybody have any further comments on this before we move on? Okay, so for this, we are going to, a couple of us will go to the June 5th meeting. After that, we'll present at the next select board. And in the meantime, I will start talking with some other energy committees and see if they're interested in just in a discovery phase with us. Does that sound fair to everybody?
Yeah, and I might get in touch with Kim Roach as well.
Okay, in Rockingham Planning. Okay, RPC. Okay.
Do you want to do that, Lou, or do you want me to do that?
Well, maybe you should. Well, maybe we both should, because I'd like to learn about it too, actually.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
The two of us maybe can get together and get on a phone call with him or something.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
In the next week, I would say.
And one question for Henry. I know that I have on my calendar a New Hampshire Municipal Association call with New Hampshire Community Power next week. Is that something that's of any use for us to participate in?
Yeah, so that's another great educational opportunity for energy committees or select boards. The Municipal Association is doing a webinar on the 20th, Wednesday next week, noon. And it's also a great primer for the June 5th event. So we're treating the June 5th event as trying to get the audience for that event, folks like yourselves who have been thinking about community power to some degree and have done a bit of research and education around it. So they come into the June 5th event, not a totally blank slate. And the Municipal Association webinar next week is a great opportunity to do some of that upfront education.
Okay. And may I ask a question? At our last meeting, there was Jill Longval. Is she still in the mix?
Mm-hmm. She's a contractor with the Planning Commission. So she works with them.
She's actually no longer a contractor with them, and she may come back. But the way I understand it, she was already part-time, and due to COVID, she's got 2 small children, and she just had to take time to take care of her kids. So she's not working with them. Okay. So they have a little bit less resources on aggregation, unfortunately, for the time being.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next piece of the agenda here, which is the EV charging stations. This is regarding the corridor charge infrastructure from the Volkswagen monies. According to my sources, there was the request for proposals that went out and nobody replied to it, except to say that they'd like to talk to them to revamp the proposal so that people could reply to it. And they did have that meeting with several vendors and the commission that's leading this. And the vendors, I guess, say that the new request is something that they can work with and that they will submit for. So as far as I know, they're going to be releasing this again in either June or July. Brianna, do you have any further information or conflicting information?
No, I don't have any more information on the time frame. There was one update as far as the level 2 charging stations. There was an RFP release for a specific site in Concord, in a parking lot in Concord. I think it's currently owned by the state. And the RFP is to put in a few charging stations in that parking lot. And from what I understand from actually attending the meeting that you mentioned with all of the contractors to talk about the fast charging RFP, OSI said they were going to be releasing some sort of pilot funding opportunity for the level 2s. So I think that's what this current RFP is. And hopefully I don't have this on good authority, but I'm hoping that means that they're starting to look at releasing the level 2 funds, hopefully sooner. So that's just something that we should keep an eye on as well, in coordination with the DC fast charging one as well. So I'll keep everyone posted if I see anything about the level 2s, but that could be another opportunity that we can look at.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. I think that the level 2 that they're offering now is just pretty much at the State House, so that lawmakers can plug in when they go up there. So I think that's kind of a special case.
Yeah, I think they've said that they do want to keep those spots open for the public as well. I think it's definitely very conducive to lawmakers because it's very close to the State House, which is good. I think the more that we can get, EVs in the minds of the legislature, then the better. But yeah, it's definitely a niche type of RFP for them. And I was going to ask, this is related to the level 2s, and I was hoping that Russ would be on for me to ask this, but I was on a webinar earlier today, and somebody from ChargePoint was discussing a platform called Sourcewell, and I guess it's an option for nonprofits, government entities, and I believe municipal entities to be able to solicit equipment or services from basically outside vendors. And ChargePoint said that they offer a 20% discount on level 2 charging stations if you go through Sourcewell. And it seems like the town might be able to become a member of that. I don't believe there's a cost to it. And it seems as though if you're a member that you have access to those unique discounts. So I just didn't know if Russ or maybe even Julie, if you knew if the town either was a member of Sourcewell or if we looked at becoming a member. I don't want to put you on the spot, Julie, but
I don't think we are.
Okay. Yeah, it was just the first that I heard of it, and it kind of perked my interest because of those discounts. It was 20% off a level 2 charger and 5% off of a DC fast charger. So I can try and do a little more research on it, but just figured I would bring it up at this meeting to see if anyone had heard about it.
No, I hadn't heard of it either, but it sounds like something that we could look into. And if there's no fee to join, maybe the Energy Committee could join on behalf of the town. And I see that Amy had her hand up.
Can you spell it for me, Brianna? I'm not sure I'm hearing it right.
Yeah, sure. It's Source, SOURCE, well, WELL, all one word.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So we're continuing to track down that money, and there was a delay, and now because of the pandemic, there's probably more of a delay, but we'll get there someday. We'll all look back and laugh.
I'll try to do some more research on it too, because if for instance, we were to get Volkswagen money for either the DC or the level 2, if there's an option where we could get the discount on top of the Volkswagen funds, that could, lower the cost even more. So I'll try and do some research on whether or not, we can get access to that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. The next, anybody else on that agenda item before we move? Good. Okay. I have listed here the greenhouse gas inventory updated by Dave Sharples, who is not on the meeting, but I do remember he saying that an intern was coming in May, and it's May. So Julie, do you know if the intern has come? Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Julie.
Sorry, I had us all minimized and couldn't find the button. The departments were all asked to find 10% of their budget that they can not expend, just in case we need it, which I think we will. And so a lot of interns have gone away. So that might be what Dave's cut was. I don't know.
Actually, at the not last week, but last month's sustainability meeting, Dave talked about it, and some of them have gone away, but he's been able to negotiate with ours to be able to work virtually as needed. And the bottom line is we're still going to get ours. And yeah, for the rest of the details, it's probably best to get it from Dave. But yeah, there were some issues, and they had to do all the interview processes virtually, but they got the person they wanted, and she's still going to be able to do it despite the pandemic.
Oh, that's good news. Okay. All right. Well, then that brings us to the next agenda item, a sustainability committee update. Do you have any updates, Robin?
Just that, because they're enforcing the 3-board rule this year. So as of last week, I'm not on the sustainability committee anymore. So yeah, it was a surprise to me too. I think they're still trying to work some how to get information out to the public. That's been a big concern of several people on the committee, and it was talked about at the meeting last week. And how to get information out to the public so people can get stuff, a website resource. And there's a lot of issues with what are the town rules and the Facebook rules and so. That's one of the big issues. And then they're trying to figure out how to do a virtual sustainability fair if they're not able to do one where people can come en masse.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. That is a situation. And as you know, we have our October 4th Drive Electric event scheduled. Who knows? But I'm thinking that maybe we can go ahead with that since it's an or a modified version of that. Since it's an outdoor event, it's in the fall, so it won't, it'll be still decent weather. I think that the test drive part might need to go away, like people getting in other people's car, the dealership cars. I don't know, but just other people standing there with their hoods up doesn't seem overly bad if people were wearing masks. I don't know. I mean, the time will tell. But anyway, we'll see. Okay, and the meeting is pretty much almost over. Here we have the other section. Anybody have any other news? Any new news? Anything exciting?
This is Brianna. Julie probably knows more about this than me, but I heard a rumor that the legislature might try to meet in the Army National Guard's Air Force hangar in the coming weeks. That would be the House. I think the Senate was going to try to meet in the House chambers so they can spread out, but apparently the Air Force hangar can fit like 1,000 people, so they can space everybody out adequately. I don't have a date or anything on that. That's just the latest scuttlebutt that I heard, and figured I would pass that along in case any of the interesting topics we were looking at, like net metering, might come up for anything like that. Julie, I don't know if you have any insights, but that's what I heard.
You have a better source than I do. I've never heard that.
Okay.
I did want to ask you, though, is it Representative Harrington who's the one that's so strongly against any energy bills? Yes, him and Representative Vose. They kind of are a duo. I just wanted to give you a little, anecdote of working in the House on energy bills. Whenever the word energy comes up, that fella comes rushing down the aisle to get to the well to speak at the podium. Yep. A lot of energy.
What was the other guy? Was that Harrington that you said?
Vote.
Yeah, Vote? Harrington and Vose. Vose, V-O-S-E. He's from Epping.
Oh. And
Harrington, I believe, is from Stratford, I want to say. He used to be a nuclear engineer at Seabrook. And then I think he was a PUC commissioner. He and Michael Vose are also somewhat connected to the New England Ratepayers Association. I'm not sure if folks have heard, but this is actually probably a good thing to just make everyone aware of. The New England Ratepayers Association is what has been described as a shadowy group, quote unquote, because they have never disclosed their membership. But they have submitted a petition to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, to basically undermine states' net metering policies. So this would be national. And I can send the petition if anybody is interested in it. But basically, they're asking FERC to declare any net metering resale back from a rooftop solar array to a utility. They're asking them to declare that as a wholesale sale, which basically would mean that states can't set the compensation rate. So it would drop the compensation rate pretty significantly because it wouldn't be anything over the wholesale rate. So I know that gets very wonky, but it would not be good if FERC were to agree with them and declare that. So we're following it pretty closely. Intervening at FERC is very expensive and time consuming. So Clean Energy New Hampshire hasn't become an intervener, but there are a lot of national groups that have and state groups that have. I think the Massachusetts Attorney General's office is intervening. So there's a lot of people that are in it. But I did just want to make everyone aware of that because it would be really bad for small scale renewables if that goes forward.
That's interesting. That's interesting because both from Epping, my sister and her husband just moved there into one of those new residential circular things, developments. and each house there has some solar panels that they're all feeding into the grid to reduce their electrical rates.
Oh, that's...
Yeah. And
wow.
So there it is in his own backyard.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Crazy.
All right. And does anybody have any update on offshore wind?
Can I ask Ann a question about the FERC thing first?
Sure.
Do you guys have any feel for, I mean, FERC is sometimes kind of political, you know, whoever's in that position. I mean, I'm just wondering what your feeling is of what they may do or what their inclination is.
It's a good question. I'll say I don't have a ton of experience dealing with them, but I would say they have ruled on this issue before, once, if not twice, and said that they don't want to get involved with state policies regarding net metering, that they're leaving it up to how the states want to deal with it. The FERC petition does challenge their previous rulings on that. And then I have heard from other groups that are intervening that they're a little concerned with how partisan certain members might be towards something like this. I think the commissioners are majority Republican, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll rule a certain way. So I think we'll know a little bit more as time goes on and as, you know, they start digging into it. But I would say I think they would be more in the middle, but I can't say for sure.
Okay. So there was a forum, I want to say last summer, and it's a local nonprofit that I'm forgetting the name of, but they had a former FERC head or the top guy at FERC speak. Mm-hmm. It was really interesting, and I know he has a book out that was locally at the I don't know why I can't think of it. It's in Greenland. They have the park there, kind of the greenways right on the water.
Yeah.
That I can't think of the name of anything right now, but they were selling his book, so it was pretty interesting because he had a very interesting take on nuclear power and how that could address climate change or whether it was effective, and then having come from inside the FERC, it was very interesting. So it was worth a read.
Yeah. I know at least one commissioner who I've spoken to before who has recently left. I think her term ended. So I think that actually happened to a few of the commissioners, that their term ended and then folks were appointed in. But I don't know any of the current members well.
Okay. Well, I think that is about it. Anybody have any other comments before I close out the meeting? All right. Well, thank you for coming. And
sorry, I can say really briefly on the offshore wind. From what I've heard, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management is still on pace to try and submit their final cumulative impact assessment report by the end of the year. And that report is basically what's holding up the Vineyard Wind project, which will be the first commercial project. So hopefully if they can get that report in on time as scheduled, we can start to see some more progress moving forward with offshore wind development.
Okay, thank you.
Renee, did you attend the first of the study commissions or whatever it was called, their meetings?
Yes, I did. The like the kickoff thing at UNH, I did, yes.
And what happened there?
The governor started it off. He said, we're going to go forward with offshore wind. There were a bunch of, it was a very large room with work tables, maybe 10 at each work table of various stakeholders. So it was about 8 hours of a workshop of people interacting with each other. Wow. Various, state, local, tribal officials, scientists, fishermen, everybody and anybody.
Mm-hmm. A lot of presentations.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am on their mailing list, so I get things saying when they're having more meetings. And they had a webinar recently, which I was unable to attend, but I think my friend Sylvia went. So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And I see that Henry has already left us. And I think that this format is kind of interesting so that an expert like Henry can just come in for 5 minutes without having to drive all the way to Exeter.
Right.
So there's something good to be said about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
I have a feeling this is going to become a permanent fixture. We won't always be meeting this way, but maybe it'll be more readily used.
Yes. Yeah, that could be helpful for people who are away or something. Okay, so I see our next meeting is June 10th, and I assume it's going to be the same deal as today. Okay? All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Bob Glowacki, for your